Evening. It's September 11th. Now, I'll depart from my usual smart ass things that I say on here and point out a couple things. One, you spell Alan Osborne, Alanosborne, just like it says above my head. And you should write that in Walton County for sheriff if you want change. Anyway, sorry we have some internet issues right now, but it's a little glitchy. But September 11th, for those of you who don't know me, it's pretty important to me. On September 11th, 2001, I lived in Walton County. I had just returned from Asia, doing some things over there in special operations helicopters, and I'd been home exactly about 8 or 9 days. I had gone by the squadron and picked up a beeper, and my beeper went off at the house, but I was supposed to be off for almost a month because I had been gone for over 10. I thought it was a mistake, and that's what I thought was going on. So I pulled out my code sheet and I cleared my beeper, and I said, oh, the guy before me must have had alert. I'm not even on the crew right now. I pulled out my sheet, my beeper went off again. I went in and looked at the TV, and I knew I had problems. I called the squadron and went to the squadron immediately, and the 20th SOS Green Hornets, we got on the road while every other plane in America was landing. And we went to New York City and some other places up there, Pentagon, and still some other places. And we made sure America was safe. But the day I took off and left Walton County and overflew, and I came right over 30A, I wasn't sure if America was safe. In fact, I'd never seen anything like that. And I had already been to Desert Storm and Kosovo and a bunch of other fun, exciting places in my life. But Afghanistan, and after that day, Afghanistan would become the driver in my life for almost 20 years. And I had no idea that day. Afghanistan before that day to me, other than the intel, was mostly what I watched with the Russians as a child. So never forget 9/11. Never forget what happens when the enemies of America think America is weak. If we put Kamala Harris in office, no matter where you feel about abortion, no matter where you feel about economy, no matter where you feel about anything, she won't secure our borders, and she won't provide us a military that's not woke and is prepared to go do battle. We've got problems in America. In my opinion, there's a wokeness through the land that's destroying the good order of the military and government. There's so much corruption in government that it just has to be stopped. Every nation who suffers we've seen it too many times. We cannot let corruption into our government. We can't let favoritism, because we see countries fall from this all the time. And what we have in America is what everybody wants. And because of that, it's fragile. So in the memory of 9/11 today, don't ever forget that. All it takes is one crack in the armor and somebody will be on the attack. And if you're an American, you're going to have to get past Donald Trump being an ass sometimes and understand that his policies and the things he understands how to make America safe, even if he is an ass. And I'll be voting for him. And speaking of voting, come November 5th, please write my name in for sheriff for a change. I was going to talk about Audie Rao and Hugaboom and all the crap they wrote on there about bad leadership, but bad leadership has resurfaced in the sheriff's department. A culture that cannot be tolerated. You need to go to the Road Rage page and listen, 98 Road Rage, and listen to the audio tape of some deputies, quote, dispatching somebody's service animal on their property. That's right, shooting the dog. Now the video's missing. There's a bunch of other statements by the sheriff's department, But when you listen to the audio of what occurred, and it happened before the primary election because Sheriff candidate Aaron Murray is even referred to during the shooting. And I believe his animal ended up dead during his campaign. This is a culture. Mikey hired somebody who was 16 years non-current to run the jail. He has a culture. Mikey, isn't Cosin your chief of investigations? Isn't he your cousin? And didn't you build his whole career while you've been in office? And Mikey, hadn't you spent, according to your time cards, a fourth of your last term in office being an FSU instructor? This is just unacceptable. Mike has created a culture of what the brand of the sheriff's department is. He even has a PIO who teaches the branding of the Walton County Sheriff's Office, and Mikey's promoting that brand. Let me tell you something. Alan Osborne doesn't give a damn about the brand of the Walton County Sheriff's Department. That's a TDC issue for this county. What I care about is the Sheriff's Department here to protect and serve? Or do they have a plan to stop some of this corruption, some of these environmental crimes? I mean, right now, the sheriff's getting advice from a lawyer who's also advising the person I say is doing the biggest environmental crime in the county, Sandestin. I mean, does that pass the smell test? But this shooting of an animal, somebody's pet. Look, I know there were emergency vehicles in the area, but those pets were probably scared. And this was handled unacceptable. I want to say poorly, but that's not hard enough. It's got to be. It was handled unacceptably. There is a trend in the Sheriff's Department that cannot be accepted by the people of Walton County. We need to know what Mike's going to do about all these illegal immigrants. We need to know about it. We need to know about this culture in the Sheriff's Department. And most of all, Mike is getting 66.2 or 0.3, according to the BCC meeting, Melissa Thomason, and we don't have a clue what he's doing with it. We're in there arguing in the county of whether we can fund $10,000 and $20,000 to these organizations that help children and the elderly, and Mike's budget is 66%, and we don't have a clue, and he doesn't want to open up his books. Alan Osborne will open up my books, and I'll do a full forensic audit of the Sheriff's Department on policies, finance, and accountability of equipment, and I know how to do it. I'm not scared. People say I'm not qualified. Mikey was appointed to the Defuniak Springs by Graham Fountain. His cousin Clayton and a bunch of connected people got a political appointment so he could run as an incumbent after corruption had already spread through the DFS. And then he ran against somebody who Ralph was wildly unpopular. Mike never really was in charge of anybody, and I supervised way more people should I be elected sheriff before coming to the Sheriff's Department than Mike ever thought about. I ran programs, went to continuing education, and received qualifications that he just simply can't understand. I've been a contracting officer for the government and audited my contracts. Okay, I know what I'm doing. I was always accountable and ready to open my books to the public because I understand serving the public is serving you, us, our community. I don't give a damn what the rest of this state thinks about Walton County, as long as the citizens and people who live and vacation here think it's safe and think it's doing the right thing. But shooting somebody's animals, this sexual discord that's rampant through the Sheriff's Department, there's a trend history of it. And then you got the sheriff's senior leadership giving him money and holding up his name next to somebody who's accused of racism. And then you got old Audie out there trying to ruin Derek Gossett and his family over Derek's free speech. Now, the heck with you, Roddy. Yeah, anytime you want to talk about the Constitution, Roddy, and what your people have done, do you know the Sheriff's Department and the BCC put me on a list, and I have no idea, a written list, and passed it around. And I have no idea what the due process was to obtain such a worthy award to be on such list. In other news in the county, Boots, I got to hand it to you. You really bent old Chucky over. So in the garbage score, and it'll probably cost us another lawsuit, but they had to divide up the points based on the ability, and I'm just going to shorten the story instead of going through the scorecards. They basically had to take a certain amount of points and divide them all up to each company based on, by points, who could do the best job of fulfilling the requirements of the contract. And you know what Boots did? He said 3 of the people could do absolutely nothing, which we know can't be right. Boots determined using what? I have no idea. Boots, you clearly weren't thinking. Boots decided that he could determine that the other 3 companies couldn't possibly ever do it. And so he would give all his points to Waste Management, thereby screwing his cousin Chucky and make sure that his company he was going to be doing business for had no chance of getting it. Just like he said he would. Boy, that backfired on you, Chuck, didn't it? But here's to you, Boots, for staying consistent. It'll probably get us sued. We can't get to November soon enough. You can't make this shit up. Look, Clay, there's no due process. Stan, I need to know the status of that code complaint. And we need to know what's going on. I also need an update on the mediation that we still don't have a date for. We need to know what y'all want to do. You can't make this shit up on the Alan Osborne Show. But remember the fallen. Remember the people who stood up for freedom on this day 23 years ago. And remind yourself, are we creating an America that will produce people who will go do the same thing my uncle did on Iwo Jima, my relatives did in the Korean War, and what I did during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and what my dad did during the Cold War over the North Atlantic? So another generation has to pick up the torch, and we're creating a culture that doesn't include pride in America and pride in public service. And I'm offering that to you if you don't like what you're getting now on the Alan Osborne Show. So stay tuned for more things. Remember the fallen, say a prayer, and go vote. If we don't vote, we could have Kamala in office. And Kamala, Kabul, she sounds like a bad preacher. And that scares me because I've been preached to long enough. I'm ready for the truth, even if it comes out of somebody who's an ass. His mouth, as long as it's the truth, it's better for America than a nice lie. The hard truth is always a better option, in my opinion. You can't keep them straight on the Alan Osborne Show, but you can tell them. You can unelect them. And you need to look at the District 5 race, because Phony Anderson's got some issues too. Hey, Tony, how come the same developer of Sandestin's giving you all that money and the same law firm that the sheriff's hiring? That's who we're trying to get the enforcement on, right, Tony? Go look at Mr. Miller running against Tony. Now, just keep in mind that Mr. Miller's a Democrat, and really Tony was his whole life. So let's just throw that out the window and realize that Tony has failed us. And think this out. Tony didn't win. If you're out there in the county and you believe us people down in the South End deserve the same thing you do in the North End and in the middle, realize this, that Tony lost every precinct in the South End of the county. So how do you think we think he's doing? So y'all get on the bus, Gus, and let's discuss something. And let's put young Mr. Miller in the office, because he hasn't been corrupted yet. And that young man's been coming to meetings, And he's probably the first young man or woman that I've seen consistently come to meetings in my last 20 years of going to them. And effort should be recognized. Y'all keep them straight out there on the Alan Osborne show, because they can't keep themselves straight. Demand answers from your sheriff's department. Demand an audit. Look at the numbers. We voted no. 70% of us voted no for an additional sales tax so they could borrow 30 to 40 million. And here we are just a few months later, and we're having a discussion about borrowing 30 or 40 million. Can our elected officials not listen to us? Because apparently we don't matter. During the garbage contract, we had a public meeting about it with no public comments. I'm still floored by that. I stand by for the legal action. Somebody pipe those people and prepare to be boarded. I think we're about to be sued again. And you can't make this shit up on the Alan Osborne show. I'll see you real soon. Talk to you later. Remember, teach people how to spell my name and where to write it in on the ballot. See you next time.